always get our Jacob from the Midwest of the United States. So this is British Jacob, and our source for it has more colors available. So of the raw fleece, it is spun in the US by the same mill that spins our regular Jacob. And so this is British Jacob. It's available to us in more colors because I guess maybe they have a bigger pool of sheep and can separate the colors more easily than our current suppliers have. And our current suppliers kind of focus on the lighter shades. I do know that. So anyway, this is Jacob from Great Britain. And I don't know about you, but when I personally felt it, like when I personally felt, this is the skein. I have a couple here. I mean, it's nice and squishy, but I personally, the first thing I thought was, well, ours is so much softer. But then when I started knitting with it, I just loved it as much as I love our other Jacob. So for those of you who don't know, we do carry Jacob yarn. We carry it in fingering weight and sport weight, and it's available to us really just in one color from our US source because they are mixing all the different colors from the fleeces, and I'll get to that in a minute. But our Jacob is a medium gray, and it's so soft and airy. It's so touchable. I love it. And I knit myself a personal sweater with it. And I know Cynthia has knit the same sweater with it. And yeah, and then we have some samples in our shop knit in it that are they're the sweaters I always reach for if I'm chilly at an event. I choose to put on one of the Jacob samples because the fabric is so light and breathable that even when it gets warm after a chilly morning, I can still wear it most of the day. So it's a fiber that I really enjoy wearing. The Jacob sheep are a British breed of sheep. They're small and spotted, which is called piebald. So they're spotted. Their most distinguished feature is their multiple horns. They can have anywhere from an average of 2 to 6 horns, and most of them have like 4. So the horns curl kind of all around their face. They're very unique looking, and you see them often at sheep and wool festivals and things like that. They're very unique sheep. Let me just share a photo. This is a photo of a few of them. That's what they look like. You can see that the one that's standing in the in the upper part has horns that are sticking up and a couple horns that are sticking out to the side as well. Often the horns eventually curl around, and you can see that when I say spotted, I don't mean that the fleece shades from one point to the other. The spotting is very distinct and defined within the fleece. It has really sharp outlines within the fleece, so the dark fiber is easy to separate from the light fiber if that's going to be something that's worth doing. And I'm getting off of my own track here a little bit, but the different colors of fiber, even within the same fleece, are often different textures and coarseness. So the dark fleece being, like with many sheep, the dark fleece being a little coarser, and the light fleece being a little finer and silkier. So there are those kind of considerations too. When you mix the fleece completely, you're getting kind of the strengths of both of those types of fiber. And when you separate them, you're creating lots of fiber that are characteristically different from each other, which is kind of what we see here. This yarn that we had made is a marl of the dark fleece and light fleece. And if you untwist a little bit of it, you can see that it's not the kind of marl yarn where one strand is completely white and one strand is completely dark, and it creates a very distinct barber pole texture. With this yarn, the individual plies are almost like a 2-ply of white and dark and different variations throughout each ply, so that then when you put the 2 plies together, it's much more tweedy and subtle than barber pole type marl. And when you knit it into a fabric, like I have a swatch here. Let me just put this on a piece of paper to back it. When you knit it into a fabric, it can have even some streakiness within the tweediness, which is kind of cool. So with this particular yarn, it's nice that we're knitting it into a shawl, because the streakiness is going to be distributed on longer and longer rows and kind of moved around a little bit so that it's diminished. If you knitted this into a sweater, you might see larger patches of darker versus lighter tweediness that, you know, depending on your taste, you might have to contend with that. For me personally, that wouldn't bother me. I'm getting all like tangled in my on my tangents here. But back to the Jacob sheep themselves, they are pretty much they're an heirloom breed that really borders on a primitive breed. They are small and have with thin legs and not really a large carcass. They almost resemble a goat in their body type. So they're very lean and not really the kind of meat sheep that some other British breeds have developed into. This is a sheep that over the centuries, and it has been domesticated for many centuries, approximately at least 500 years of being domesticated and records kept with it. Some people believe it goes back much further than that. But during that time, it has remained a fairly unimproved breed, meaning that there's never been a big push or program to enlarge its body size or improve the fleece, you know, in any concerted way. So it's never been subjected to any kind of strict program of selective breeding, probably because it is, for some reason, kind of a minor breed that developed as a small farm choice in terms of breed. And so its development and domestication was kind of happenstance, you know, and not really organized. It doesn't have any, I don't want to say it doesn't have any particular uses, but it doesn't have any one outstanding thing about it that over the centuries was thought to be something that lent itself to a large scale improvement project. That said, its fleece is very has always been a very good product that is put to good use. It's because of its coloring, it has it has the ability to produce multiple lots of wool that can be used to vary your garments and make beautiful shaded things and woven things that with some variety. And as a household, a breed for a single household, that makes a lot of sense. That it doesn't, though, it isn't considered, for instance, a breed that produces really good or plentiful milk or particularly great or plentiful meat. So it's not one of those heirloom multi-purpose breeds like the Gotland that we talked about in Barn Box recently. So, but because of that, it retains, the breed as a whole retains a lot of its original kind of wildness and physical characteristics. And so it's an interesting breed to look at and makes for, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, one of those unique animals that in public places makes for a really nice kind of pastoral accessory, I guess. Let's see. Both the rams and the ewes have the spotted fleece and the multiple horns, and some markings of their fleece. And the markings, remember, are the patterns of spots on their bodies. Some of the markings within the fleece are both breed specific and some are random. So you can have both. For many centuries, it was believed that Jacob's descended from the same breed of sheep described in Genesis, and this story still has its true believers today. But in fact, there's actually no proof that Jacob's sheep are the exact same breed described in the Old Testament. I thought this was interesting. There was a couple in Canada, I think in maybe the early 2000s, that was going to do this great thing and bring Jacob's sheep back to Israel, like back to the homeland. And they were on this mission to do this. And the minister of Israel's agricultural, or the sheep expert on the Israeli agricultural ministry said at the time, don't bother, Jacob's sheep are related to Jacob in the Bible the same way that American Indians are related to India. That was her kind of like response to this whole endeavor. Don't bother. Okay. In truth, the Jacob breed is thought to have been brought to the UK from the Middle East, possibly via Spain. Spotted sheep can be seen, and we've seen this before in studying the history of animals. Spotted sheep can be seen in Egyptian wall paintings dating back to 1800 BC. It's unclear that they were Jacob's, although they had many of the same characteristics. And they are considered to be one of the ancient sheep breeds. The breed was named in the 20th century for the biblical figure of Jacob, whose flock of spotted sheep is recorded in the book of Genesis. But an actual, like I said before, an actual DNA link has never been established and is unlikely. But the Jacob does seem to be more closely linked to breeds from Africa and Southwest Asia than to other British breeds. So where many of the primitive breeds that we have studied in Barn Box have descended from the Northern European shorttail breeds, this one doesn't really have those close ties. It seems to be linked closer to African breeds from Africa and the Middle East. Let's see. A 2009 study using, I'm going to probably get this wrong and Lindy may correct me, but using endogenous retrovirus genetic markers determined that Jacob's sheep appear to be related to the sheep from Africa. And this relationship may lend some credit to another legend about Jacob's sheep origin story, that the first spotted sheep appeared in England after the destruction of the Spanish Armada in 1588. So at that point, all of a sudden, quite a few breeds arrived in the parts of Northern Europe from Africa via Spain and Italy. And that was due to their strong sheep trading ties with the various North African countries. It's therefore entirely possible that, given the available genetic studies, that the legend of Jacob's sheep arriving with the Spanish Armada is the more valid. There's more validity in that legend. So by the mid 1700s, Jacobs were quite popular in England and was referred to by that time as the Spanish sheep for much of its early recorded history. It's been bred in England for at least 350 years and kept for centuries now as a park sheep to graze upon and ornament large estates and parklands. During this period, there was kind of a trend among English estate owners and park designers to manage their land through natural landscaping. And so they used the Jacob sheep. They were attracted to the Jacob sheep because they're so interesting to look at, but they're also quite disease resistant, easy and independent birthers, and efficiently adaptable to weather and grazing conditions. And they will eat, like many of the primitive breeds, will feed on just about anything and turn just about anything into the kind of muscle tissue and energy that sustain them well. So like the Shetland sheep, and I'm trying to think of other Highland sheep that we have studied, even the Polworth to some extent that we talked about, can get by on, not just get by on, but get by on and sustain itself in a quite healthy manner on scrubby grasses and poor forage of poor nutritional value, and make a good go of it. So they're the ideal sheep to allow to wander on the wilder areas of a large estate and some of the parklands. Jacobs were first imported into North America during the mid 1990s, and interestingly, as kind of an exotic zoo animal. They were, probably really popular as an exhibit. And although it's not known when the first Jacobs were, transported to or transformed into an animal of interest for farms, but imports of Jacobs sheep for the farming industry to the USA began to occur during the 1970s and 80s. So their popularity has increased kind of in a parallel way to the kind of popular interest. In 1989, a Jacob Sheep Breeders Association was created in North America with the first North American registry, which included 400 sheep. So most Jacobs in the US today are descended from those 400 sheep. And that's kind of an interesting fact. I think, and for those who weren't here, I apologize, but during our last Barn Box chat, we talked about how the Gotland breed has such a well-recorded history, and so many breeding options within that breed are available because of because of the parallel purposes of the different Gotland breed associations and their ability to work side by side and together. And with a breed like Jacob's, it's a very minor breed. It always has been. And so an active, kind of knowledgeable breed association wasn't developed until later in the domestication of this animal. And I think that kind of, it occurred to me that that might be why there isn't as much information about Jacobs, and their development was allowed to kind of take its own course rather than lead to any improvement. There just wasn't a lot of consensus or even community around this breed like there are with some other breeds. Modern Jacobs are reared mainly for wool, meat, and skins. I think the wool is probably even the close to #1 product, because the bodies certainly aren't all that large, and rearing them mainly for meat wouldn't make sense. They differ from other British and Northern European primitive breeds in that they are a single coated sheep with a medium fine fleece, rather than a long wool or a double coated sheep like Shetland. The primitive Shetlands are double coated and have a very fine undercoat and a longer outer coat. Jacob lambs of the more primitive lines, though, can be born with a coat of guard hair to protect against rain and cold, but this coat is shed at 3 to 6 months of age, and it never grows back. Individual Jacobs have distinguished markings, like we talked about before, and that enables the shepherd to actually identify specific sheep from a distance and to keep track of them fairly easily. Again, why, there isn't really a need to have a registry if you can, just kind of keep it all in your head. And if you're a shepherd and that's your main job, you don't really need to necessarily keep a book about it. Jacob sheep are white with large black spots, and the black spots have, like I said, very well-defined edges, allowing the colors to be easily separated. Harvesting 2 colors from one sheep can yield natural white or black yarn, as well as a variety of grays. The most desirable coloring or marking pattern is exhibited by an animal that has approximately 60% white fleece and 40% in a random pattern of black or lilac, lilac is what the brown is called. It's kind of a warm brown, and when you see it next to chocolate brown, you really do see the lilac kind of emerge. I think in human hair terms, it would be called like an ash brown. And the flock that we source our own USA Jacob from has quite a bit of that warm brown in it. So our medium gray Jacob yarn has a lot of warmth to the tone of it. Jacobs are shorn once a year, most often in the spring, and the average fleece weight is 4 to 6 pounds. So that's fairly small for a wool producing sheep. In general, the fleece is light, soft, springy, and open with little grease or lanolin. And there may be some of what we call kemp included, which is a third fiber that sheep, mostly the primitive types or the heritage types, can exhibit in their fleeces. Kemp is almost like has a straw-like texture. It's almost like a hemp fiber in its characteristics, and generally that is a fiber that it's usually very sparse when it occurs, and generally falls out of the fleece in the processing, but once in a while you may come across a little kemp hair that did get spun into the yarn. So if you do, that's what it is. It's usually doesn't take dye very well, or it stands out from the natural fiber by being kind of a straw color. The crimp on these fibers is fairly loose. It is a crimp and not a spiral, so it does have the zigzaggy shape, but it's fairly loose. It's not that super tight zigzag that a merino would be. Let's see. When the fleeces are I have to back up a minute. This is something that's more particular to the British Jacob than the American Jacobs, but when the fleece is the British Jacobs have denser fleece, and the black wool often grows a little longer, or it can be a little shorter than the white wool. So it can grow at a different length and have a slightly different texture. And when it does that, it's called a quilted fleece. And it's considered an undesirable trait because, obviously, if the longer fibers grow a little too long, they can be difficult to mill. So most people like to shear their sheep when they're between 4 and 6 inches. That's kind of the ideal length for getting the most staple length that the mill equipment can handle. And if one color of the fleece is a little bit different than the other, that can cause like slippage in the machinery and a slight incompatibility. It's not something that is super common. This quilted fleece isn't super common, but it can happen that way and is considered undesirable. The medium fine grade wool has a high luster and is sought after by hand spinners. The lighter colors tend to have more luster and drape, while the dark colors tend to be springier and have more body and a little more coarseness. And that's why I thought this would be interesting for the wool along, because it is the darker fleece, and it definitely has that springiness that sets it apart from our own Jacob, which is lighter in color and silkier and softer. It's definitely very squishy. And if you've been knitting with it, that fabric is you just constantly want to dig your hands into it. It's really nice. Okay. Let's see. Again, the different shades of wool from these fleeces are the experience for most people who work with it in hand spinning and knitting. And it's experiencing the slight differentiations and the subtle variations even between the different colors from one coat is one of the pleasures of working with wool that's untreated. If this was a type of wool that was sought after commercially, the colors would be treated with chemicals to become more similar to each other. So they would be softened and stretched and, treated so that they were more consistent, that all the fiber behaved the same way in the milling equipment, and kind of a more generic product would be created. For us as a group, we get to experience the real fleece the way it really is, and the real we have like a little private window into kind of this mysterious type of fleece that grows two lengths and different colors all on the same animal. It's pretty cool. So let's see. As a primitive breed, the Jacob wool can have a range of fineness from anywhere from 26 to 37 microns, which refers to, for those who don't know, the microns refers to the diameter of the fiber. And that puts it pretty squarely in the medium medium fleece range. Excuse me. And the staple length can be anywhere from 3 to 7 inches. And so that makes it, that puts it really squarely in a range of fiber type that is very appealing to hand spinners. Many hand spinners, while they love the finer wools, don't always like to spin with them because they're challenging. So when you're, just like when you're knitting and you want sort of an easy project to sit down with when you're tired or when you want to watch TV, spinners like to reach for something easy to spin when they don't feel like working too hard at it. So a fiber like the Jacob is just perfect for that, because not only does it have the medium qualities that make it a little easier to spin, but it has a pleasant array of fiber shades and a lustrous hand, and it can be spun into a springy, soft, but durable yarn that has a variety of uses when it's completed. It has just enough luster to give the yarns kind of a subtle sheen, but not that really high luster of, say, a Gotland or a mohair. All right, that's pretty much the extent of the kind of fiber history that I have. Does anybody have questions about the sheep that they want to ask? Anybody?
How does it wash?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
Do you still soak it in water? Does it plump up, in other words?
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, any wool can be washed in warm, any undyed wool can be washed in anything from warm to hot soapy water. Let it soak. If you need to drain if the water gets dirty and you need to drain the bath and redo it, you can do that. And then you don't want to agitate wool when it's soaking, or mishandle it, or change the water temperature too abruptly. So when the water cools, you want to rinse it in water that is the same temperature as the cooled water, and then just roll it in a towel and let it dry. I did find that this particular yarn had a little more dirtiness to it than I was used to. And that could be because the fiber coming from the UK, maybe this fiber wasn't washed as many times, or maybe they're using recycled water that isn't quite as clean as the standard in the US mills. I don't really know, but I did find that with this yarn and with the overall finished project, that I did have to soak it a couple of different times in soapy water, and I had to rinse it quite a few times to get a clear, rinse.
Thank you.
Wanda?
Yes, I was wanting to know about the climate that it likes. Can it be cool or hot?
Yeah, I think in general, the British climate, which tends to be, kind of temperate, it doesn't get super cold over there the way it does here. And it doesn't get super hot either. It's a very temperate climate that stays a little more even throughout the year. In the US, I'll try to look into that. I don't know that Jacob sheep are concentrated in any one part of our country. So I'm just not really sure how to answer that in terms of climate, but I suspect, being a primitive breed and coming from Africa, that it does, and having the, at least a primitive ability to grow, you know, only a single coat, that it tolerates warmer weather better than super cold weather, and a variety of different conditions. I did not read anything that indicated it was a hill sheep or a mountain sheep to any extent, or kept in the mountains. So that again leads me to believe it's not especially suited to cold weather the way a cashmere sheep would be, or you know, one of the double coated sheep, which are, my head is completely empty for coming up with a breed name, but that most of the highland animals have a little more hardy coat to protect them.
Okay, thank you.
Carol?
I was wondering if it is woolen spun or worsted spun. It has more
This
of a
is-
halo than I'm used to.
And that's because of the breed itself. It is a very lofty fiber, and it has a very relaxed spin. So the spinning methods from this mill are semi-worsted, which means that the wool isn't combed, so it's not a strict worsted prep, but the fiber is usually drafted more than one time before it's spun, so that kind of approximates a worsted preparation. So the multiple drafting is substituted for combing in the case of the semi-worsted yarn. And you kind of get, and what that gives you is a cleaner fiber that still retains some of the bounciness and airiness of the woolen spun product, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and the halo is really due to there is a lack of, you know, without that really tight crimp, with the more relaxed crimp, you can't spin the fiber too tight. And so that allows for a construction that it makes for a construction that allows the fiber ends a little more leeway to spring out from the yarn, from the actual shaft of the yarn, and provide that halo. But it is a nice soft halo. It's not something that makes it feel scratchy.
No, it's nice.
Okay. Yeah, it really is. Melissa?
I was wondering about their personalities. If they've sort of been raised in smaller groups, are they sort of more friendly?
They are. And you know, most sheep that are domesticated through, you know, for household use tend to be the kind of sheep that are easy to manage, and just, I don't know that, I didn't find a lot of information about the personality in the farmyard per se, because remember, these are sheep that are allowed to wander kind of far and wide on the property. And so I don't know that they are especially friendly, but nor are they big enough or mean enough to be unfriendly. Susan?
I might have missed it. What part of Great Britain does this particular wool come from?
Well, it doesn't come from Great Britain.
Oh.
I mean, it originates in Africa, you know, through, but it was domesticated in Great Britain, and it's pretty much all over. Yeah, it is found.
I thought you got the wool for actual.
You know what? I don't know. I'm assuming that, like many of the wools that we are able to import from Great Britain, it comes from a co-op that is bringing wool from kind of everywhere together.
Okay.
And that's why the different colors are available to us, is that if you're getting Jacob from a single flock, it's almost impossible to get any amount of a single color from, one flock to produce even our yarn is considered commercial to a certain extent. So I'm thinking that this is coming to us through a co-op that is collecting many, many fleeces and separating them kind of on site.
Thank you.
Lindy?
Yeah, you were mentioning that because they're for household use, that the meat can be eaten, but I'm just curious as to whether there is any cheese that is made from these, from this particular Jacob sheep.
Yeah, no, they're not known to be a milking sheep. I mean, they produce milk for their offspring, but it's nowhere in my research did I come across information that they were good milkers. They're good mothers and they're able to sustain their offspring, but again, a foraging sheep that is literally eating that is eating food of low nutritional density is not going to usually produce milk, and certainly not enough for to provide for more than its offspring. Donna?
Hi, Ann. What did you refer to as the brown, the fleece that has more brown to it? Was it lilac?
Yeah, it's known as lilac.
Oh, okay. All
And
right.
I wish I had, when I don't have it on hand, within reach. When we first started working with the mill that makes our Jacob yarn, they actually sent me a skein of, I just found a piece of Kemp in my skein here. This is what, I'm sorry, I'll get back to your question. That's what let me see. As you can see, it looks like kind of straw-like. It's kind of heavy. And this one it's all twisted up. That's why it's thick, but it's a kind of a thicker fiber. Anyway, they sent me skeins that were, one skein was the lilac and one skein was the medium gray that we could compare. And I believe when we did the Jacob fingering in the pairings club in 2018, so 5 years ago. And when we were getting ready to do that, we were trying for the lilac to get a solid, lilac shade. The mill was providing us yarn at that time from actually their own flock. So this mill that spins our Jacob yarn, they are actually keepers of Jacob sheep, and they have a pretty good sized flock, and they love the breed and they're very knowledgeable about it. And so they're really, really picky about quality, and they know all the people in the Breeders Association and such. So we were trying to get enough of just the lilac fiber to spin the yarn that we wanted, and we weren't able to do it, so they did have to mix in some medium gray with it. But that very first batch of Jacob fingering that came with the Pairings 2018 club, if you still have yours, is the lilac brown. It's kind of it has a little bit of a lavender, hint of lavender in it. It's really pretty.
Thanks.
Did anybody else have a question or just a comment or anything they want to share about
There's a question in the comment section about, do they have multiple births as many of the other breeds we've discussed?
They do. And they're not, I wouldn't say that it's a feature of the breed, but really all sheep have the ability to do that. And many of the pictures that I've seen of Jacob sheep have, twin lambs in them. And I don't know, I have a couple of other pictures. They're really from the same, source, or no, no, they're not. I don't think there are any lambs in any of the pictures I have. This is a nice profile shot of a lamb at a judging. So, I mean, I'm sorry, a sheep at judging. So you can see a nice clean sheep here with different, with a pattern of spots all over its body. You can see the multiple horns at the head. 2 of the horns kind of curl backward, and the 2 at the side curl around the face the other way. And the horns are black and kind of narrow. And interestingly, the next sheep back, you can kind of see the outlining around the spots on that sheep a little better, where the black fiber looks curlier and fluffier and the white fiber looks a little silkier. And so you get that a little bit of high-low in the spotting there, which I think is kind of interesting that you can actually see it. Okay, that's one. And then this next picture is a picture of another Jacob sheep in its kind of natural grazing. You can see where they're grazing. Like it's not lush grass. It's like root around and find something. And again, these horns are more developed and bigger and thicker. And the 2 at the top go back. And I mean, I've seen Jacob sheep with even more than 6. I know I've seen one with 7, and I feel like, I've even seen one with 8, although I can't remember exactly where. But I do remember the one that I saw with 7 was at our Worcester show one year. So they're really quite beautiful. And I love the fiber. I mean, for such a primitive breed, the fiber is so surprisingly soft. When you feel it in your knitting, I just can't describe how many levels of tactile experience this fiber offers. It's got this very sturdy, squishy feeling, but when you wear it, it doesn't, I never find it to be scratchy or uncomfortable. And the airiness that's possible in the yarn just makes the fabric ultimately the most comfortable for me, is that it's so breathable. And then when you wash it, you're not going to see this in the swatch, but when you wash it, the stitches kind of meld together. They don't erase each other, but they do full out a bit and become very cohesive and smooth surface. So you get a really nice, smooth, consistent stockinette fabric that has the appearance of being very nubbly because of this marl that we have going on here. Even our regular Jacob yarn is very heathery. It's got a lot of variation, although it's more blended than this. It does have quite a heathered look to it, and that brings a lot of depth to the fabric.
That last picture that you showed, you could actually see that the different lengths, the different colors were different lengths of the fur.
Yeah.
Right? The brown was dark, it was deeper, shorter looking, and the white puffed out more.
Yeah, and I think with the British Jacobs, their fleeces are denser, and so when you have a denser fleece, it tends to stand straight out from the skin a little bit more, and so that's probably why it
Oh, so you can really see it.
yeah. instead of like laying down, and getting longer.
They're
You know,
pretty
my
cute.
dog has the same phenomenon. He's a tricolor and his white fur is bushy and sticks out, and his black fur is very short and very fine and stays close to the skin. So it's interesting to see this on the sheep as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was watching a special about dogs, and it kind of focused on like groomers and different styles that they compete to, to do on animals. And this one kind of really famous Japanese groomer did this really cool style where they groomed the dog had spots. I'm trying to think, what kind of a dog was it? It was something really fluffy, but not a Pomeranian. I don't know why I can't remember it. Anyway, they ever so slightly shaved down one color and let the spots of the other color pop out a little bit, and then they did a rim around the colors so that it was just, I thought it was really awesome. It should have won first prize, but I guess it was a little too subtle for the judges. Anyway, totally off topic from sheep.
Sorry about that.
You brought it up, not me. All right. Well, school session is over. No.
This is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating to learn about the breed and where it comes from. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I love about the wool along is that you get to knit with it before you know what it is. And, you can guess at what it is, and and everyone is so smart now. I mean, every time we do this, someone has like a really, really, well, all of you had really educated guesses. And I'm always so pleased when people say, oh, I think it's, I think this is, it feels like Romney, but not quite Romney. And then it turns out that we're doing a Romney cross, or, that the breed developed from crossing Romneys over Merinos. And it's kind of just really lovely that what we're all doing here is actually working. And hopefully it's proving to you that that you're learning, that it's sinking in.
well, I
My
think I
mother is a
visited-
quilter and not a knitter, but she always asks me, what is your barn box sheep, and tell me about it. So yeah, it's also spreading.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that unless you're really deep into crazy quilting, you wouldn't really experience in quilting necessarily, or at least of what I know of quilting. There isn't this real desire to explore the ins and outs of like different types of fabrics to the extent that knitters are taking it up right now.
Yeah. It's
And by
almost
the
the cotton.
Yeah, and by the way, our ability to consume and make things with all of these fibers is supporting the ability of wool producers to keep producing them. And specifically, even in our business, we see that our mills are able to go to producers and say, how much more of this can you produce in the next year or 2 years? Like, what's your business plan? And, can we encourage you to, to keep more of your sheep for wool and not send as many lambs off to market, like specifically because we have this customer who is able to, who will buy it, which is super stressful for us, but also a really good, a really nice kind of credit to understand that we're influencing we're having a larger impact on an outer ring of our fiber community, I guess.
Well, I mentioned before that one of the things I like to do when we travel is find local yarn shops carrying local breeds. But I've never been educated as to what the breed is or the characteristics of it. It's just, I know I'm buying yarn from Montana, or I'm buying yarn from, San Juan Island or something like that. So I find this just fascinating. So I'm just going to give you a big shout out and thank you for this.
Oh, thank you. I mean, a lot of those producers could probably tell you all about it, but they, by and large, probably don't run into very many knitters who are asking those questions.
I think that, yeah. Or the people in the yarn shop don't know. The owner
Oh,
might.
and they wouldn't. I mean, I'm not, I don't say this to be in any way demeaning, and I'm probably not telling you anything you don't already know, but it's hard enough to find knowledgeable knitters in a yarn shop, even ours. Like, it's hard enough to hire people who are knowledgeable anymore. It's really we're all a dying breed to a certain extent. In that we're dispersed so far. I mean, there are certainly lots and lots of knowledgeable knitters and knowledgeable people professionally in our industry, but we're so dispersed that every community is lucky to have, a handful of people that can kind of be leaders in terms of knitting knowledge and yarn knowledge and wool knowledge, and often not all of those at once.
Can I ask a question about the pattern?
Yeah.
So I know that there are 2 different needles involved, but am I reading it correctly that I'm on the small needle for the entire first section?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll tell you when to change needles. And when you do change needles, you'll change needle at the end of one of the sections, one of the clue sections, and we remind you again at the beginning of the next clue. So.
Okay, so I just haven't gotten there yet. Okay.
Yes, so Anne, do you have any information you can give us about, like, I'm almost to the end of the first part of the first clue with yarn A, and I'm almost to the end of a skein. Is that about right? Or am I using my yarn up too fast?
You are using, wait, are you doing the square or?
I'm doing the square.
Oh, yeah.
I've used almost a full skein already for the, for
Yeah,
color A.
That makes sense.
Okay.
You have 2 skeins.
I do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will tell you that you will be using color A again. So you'll need your additional skein for that.
Okay, but
You
it's
should
not.
Yeah, you should have enough.
Okay. I was just concerned because I still have this much left, and I've got about 67 stitches on each side right now. And so I have to go to 75, and I'm thinking I might even get into my second skein before I get to the end of that.
That should be okay.
Okay.
I'm in the same
right
thing,
where you
Julie.
are.
Okay, and I went down a needle size. I went down to a 5 instead of a 6. Because my swatch was a little bit too big, so.
A little bit loose, yeah.
Okay.
I'm where you are too, Julie.
Oh, good. Okay. That's reassuring.
Isn't it wonderful and squishy?
Yes.
I like how squishy it is.
Yeah, I really, really liked knitting with that. I might. That would be a nice sweater for David. Like, it's so light and airy and breathable.
Yeah, is this a fingering weight, Ann? Or, oh, you know, it's all sport weight, right?
It's all sport weight, yep. But like the Jacob Sport, I find I can use it in fingering weight sweaters. So I knit the Wild Phillies with the sport weight, but Cynthia knit her Wild Phillies with the fingering weight, and both of us have a sweater we like. You know, mine is probably slightly denser than hers, but you know, I love mine and she loves hers. It's kind of cool that you can get the same gauge from the different weights, because, and the reason for that is air. You know, air is compactable and gives it, or expandable, so it gives you room to fluff it or compact it.
So with the marled color, would it not be the right kind of yarn to use for like a knit purl definition kind of pattern? Would it, you'd lose the definition for that?
You might. I've experimented with this is a and this can happen in dyed yarns too, where you have something that's so speckly that you lose the stitch definition. And what I find is it's a good idea to play around with scale. So if you find a very large pattern with a lot of blockiness to it, it will hold up, and the luster in this yarn will help to highlight the shifts. So something like the Kaisa sweater, which has that large checkerboard surface pattern, or the crooked trail scarf, which has a large cable in the middle and a big checkerboard texture on alongside, or even the caravan blanket, something like that might work really well with this. You might have to swatch a few different patterns to find out what's going to work. But something with wide ribs, or large welts, like a welted hat or something, would look nice in this too. And if you get the right pattern, it can actually, the pattern itself can offer an illusion effect to the yarn that will help distinguish the texture, if that makes sense. But some little tiny knit purl pattern probably wouldn't work very well.
I was really about how well the Jacob matched with the color B. It's like it just melts right into that next color. It just looks so good. I finished the first clue already, and really just absolutely loved knitting the yarn. It was just wonderful.
Yeah, and yet it does, color B will pop off when it's all, you know, put together. And it is kind of magic how that works. You know, we work on the color arrangement, and then I am full of doubts and worried that people won't like it, and then it all comes together in the end, and it's so handsome. And I always end up like pretty pleased with it. So now you can change your colors around if you want to. I know it's probably a little too late for most of you to do that, or to change color A. But the one thing I would say is that for those who have opened everything, the 3-ply yarns are denser than the 2-ply yarns, and the 2-ply yarns, and therefore the 2-ply yarns are going to have more yardage than the 3-ply yarns. So they're all 2 ounces, but the yards per ounce does vary between the yarns, because even though they're the same diameter, some of those yarns are much denser than others. And if you put them side by side, you'll immediately see it. You can practically see through the Jacob. But other ones, you know, are very solid. So if you're gonna switch your color around, just keep that in mind that that you won't get, you might not get through 2 different clues with and be able to reuse your yarn. You might have to buy another skein of like a yarn if you want to push it around to a different spot. But your 2-ply yarns will go pretty far. They are very, I was surprised how much of a difference in yardage there was actually. We stipulated like a minimum yardage per 2 ounces, but some of them go way over that, which is kind of cool. Even though the yarn label probably doesn't say so.
Anne,
Yes. Yes. Did we lose whoever that was?
I think it was Marilyn, but she's muted back up. So I'm not sure. It's good to see so many new faces.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was wondering if you'll be giving a reminder each time so that all we have to do is tap on the little bar and we'll get right to the meeting.
Yes.
Okay, good, because I don't know how to get my picture on here. And I'm just a little shy on the mechanics of all this.
If you go to the top of your, are you on an iPad or what?
I'm just on my phone.
Okay, at the top, do you see little icons that show like a video camera and a microphone? She just muted herself again.
It says
So
my
she's got
microphone
those
is,
buttons.
and it says my video, your video is stopped.
Yeah, so tap on that icon and it should open up.
Okay, no, it doesn't. At least, I don't know, can you all see me?
No, we can't see you, Marilyn.
Oh, I bet for Zoom, you might need to tell Zoom, you might need to tell your phone that it's okay to share your video with Zoom, right? Or share your mic. You might have to give permission in your phone. And you may get a pop-up about that it wants to share your camera.
Does your icon in the upper and on at the top, does it say start video? Do you have one that says start video?
No, I just have, I think it looks like a picture of a speaker with an X.
That's your mute button. And then you should have another one that looks like an old time video camera.
No, I don't.
Okay.
It just says safe driving mode, whatever that is.
Okay. Can you
Uh,
turn off the safe driving mode?
You know what it might be? If you're holding your phone vertically, you're not going to see all the buttons, but if you turn it horizontally, then sometimes you'll see more buttons, and that might be the problem.
Or it could be because you've got it on safe driving mode. It's
Yeah.
not showing you the video. It's not showing you the video. So if you can turn off safe driving mode, your video icon might show up. So. But it's good to see new faces too. We have lots of new faces, which is always nice.
And hopefully they think well of us.
Yeah. What's that old, remember that old Girl Scout song we all sang, make new friends, but keep the old?
Yeah. Hopefully we're making a good impression, ladies.
I don't know.
Elizabeth, my mother wouldn't let me join the Girl Scouts because she didn't want to have to drive me to the meetings. So
Well,
I don't know that one.
My mother was our brownie troop leader, so
Oh, so you had to.
yeah, I was in Girl Scouts for a long time. I
I'm really jealous. I just want you to know that.
yeah, I really.
My
liked
brother was in the Girl Scouts too. Well, actually brownies, because my
Uh-huh.
mother was brownie leader, and my sister was in the brownies, and my brother was also in the brownies because he was the same age.
I love
Cub Scouts was more fun. I always wanted to be in the Cub Scouts because they did cool
Yeah.
stuff. But all I
I
could do was
didn't have
brownies.
enough boys in my town for Cub Scouts, so there were a number of boys in the brownies.
Hello?
I-
Our YMCA had a program called the Indian Guides, and little boys could join the Indian Guides, and they always went with their dads. And they wore these headbands with the feathers sticking up and back, which is totally inappropriate today. But I always wanted to be an Indian guide because they got to do the coolest things. You know, they were always outside. I'm like, man, that looks like fun.
Well, here they had Indian princesses for the girls and their dads, and it was
Oh.
Indian guides for the boys and their dads.
Nice.
I don't know. I did some cool stuff as a Girl Scout. But many of the songs I learned have been since banned.
Yeah.
On account of being just so inappropriate these days, or just too catchy
Well, they've
for
been
anyone?
banned for years.
Oh.
And for those that are new, and to remind me, because this is only my second time, when will the yarn be available for individual sale?
after each reveal, we'll put it on the website. So
Okay.
after today, the Jacob will be available.
Okay.
And I'll remind someone. You might not see it till Monday because the office is closed tomorrow, but I'll talk to David about it.
And just for a couple of you people, for anybody that's new to Zoom, when you join the meeting, if you could go on mute during Ann's talk, when she's talking about it, and then we can all chatter afterwards or beforehand. And you cannot use Zoom on two devices in the same area. Like if you've opened Zoom on your laptop and you move to an iPad and go someplace else in the house, it gets feedback and we get this big echo going on, which is a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
there's a question in the chat from Allison. She says, will it matter if the larger needle size was used in clue 1? Yardage, fabric, density?
It might. I mean, I didn't do that, so I don't know. But in general, in terms of yardage, it might matter. In terms of density, it will matter. And in terms of compatibility with the rest of the gauge for the rest of the piece, it will matter. So you might need to go up a needle size for when we change needles, you would need to go to a bigger needle size. But that might cause you to require some more yarn, although I'm pretty sure I have allowed for plenty of leeway in terms of yardage. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Yeah.
When I knit the prototype, which you won't see until the end, I overshot the sizing by quite a lot and ended up taking out like 30 rows of not ripping out. I didn't do that. But in the patterning, I eliminated 30 rows because I did run out of color A. And also I switched some colors around because I ran out of another color. So I ran out of color A with like 1 row to go. So I took out 30 rows to compensate. So because I know you guys and the things you do. And just kidding. I know you fondly. And so, I think I have, you know, accommodated every eventuality that, you know, you could come across, and we will have extra skeins of everything available should it look like you're gonna get low, or should you want to use your colors in a different way, and you want to be sure to have enough for the outer edges, etc. Does that make sense to everybody?
And two of my colors, when I wound them and weighed them, they were under 2 ounces. But I don't know if the yardage, if the yardage was to the amount that you specified, or was it 2 ounces? I mean,
It should be.
Which came first?
Yeah, they might be under because they're the right yardage. And
Okay.
whenever I count the strands in a skein, they're usually over by a couple strands of what we ask for. Were they way under, or don't you know?
Well, D was 1.95 and 1.9, and I got the large.
Yeah.
And E, the one was 1.85.
And those are both, both of those are within the acceptable,
Okay.
like standard variation.
Okay.
And probably it's probably more of a moisture thing than anything. You know, when we get this, we weigh every single skein that comes in, and we cull out anything that's, I think our deviation is 5%, I think. It might be 10, but I think 10 is an industry standard, and we usually try to go with 5. But even at that, with the kind of variation in humidity that we've been having here, it can, you know, that can vary a lot. Lots of times the mills are shipping the skeins, they're dry, but they haven't been dry for a month. They've been dry for like a few days when they get shipped. So that means there's still going to be moisture in them, and they're going to dry out further.
Okay.
But typically they are winding them to the yardage that we ask for. Sorry, UPS is here.
There's a couple questions in the chat. Let me see if I can find them. Oh, clarification on posting photos. I don't care. I mean, at this point, we all have, I don't know if I would post photos of all the yarn, although for people who are doing the hap shawl, we use 3 different yarns in the hap shawl. So we've opened almost every one. And as far as posting pictures on the forum, you know, posting pictures of your progress and etc. I don't, do you mind if we'll post photos in the forum, Anne?
I'm sorry, I had to go answer the door. I didn't hear the question.
The question is about whether we can post progress photos. And I said, I think we can post progress photos because we've all opened the first yarn. And as far as posting photos of all of the yarn on our project pages, I don't know what the protocol is on that.
Do you remember what people did last year? I don't remember.
I can't remember what I had for breakfast, so I'm not the person to ask.
Hmm.
But if the yarn
I
on
mean,
your project page,
photos
and
are,
I don't think
photos are fine, and I think you can only show progress up to the clue that's been released. So
right.
I think progress
But
photos.
last year, we tried not to share yarns that people might not have opened yet, but we opened 3 yarns for this first clue. So, you know,
Mhm.
I guess.
Well, for the blanket, it's only 2 yarns and I'm trying not to get spoiled, so.
Yeah. Okay, well, I know for the hat, we use 3 skeins, don't we? Don't we use A, B, and D? Or did I read that wrong?
For
Oh,
the
yeah.
square. For
In the
square.
blanket, we use 3 also.
Yeah, and I think for the triangle, it's just 2. I don't
No,
have,
there's a D right at the end. Yeah, I hadn't
Okay.
noticed that.
Yeah, I think it's just, are you actually knitting?
Oh,
You're
I
not
see, Debbie, I see.
I missed it for a long time too, Catherine, so I understand completely.
Yeah, I'm trying not to get spoiled just because I like the surprise of it, but I can stay off Ravelry. I don't have to.
That's
be
what
on
I
it.
think. I think for those people who don't want to see it, they just don't go on Ravelry.
Or you
Yeah,
could just turn on your, I just forgot what I saw setting. Right? We all have one of those, breeze by it.
I think if
No.
you don't, I think if you post the progress shots, it's fine, and maybe just not show the yarns then. And it's only gonna be like 6 weeks, and you can put them in your stash then. You can take pictures now and then upload them later.
I think progress pictures will also help us make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. I mean,
Yeah,
that was the hardest thing for me.
it's
was-
definitely, it definitely eggs people on, and it gives people who might be sitting on the fence about joining up, it gives them a little, incentive to make one for themselves. And especially because I really, and not just speaking from my own experience, but I get the sense from everybody that already they're loving the yarn qualities and everything, that it's been already very enriching. Oh, Renee, your dog is just beautiful. That dog. What kind of dog is that? Is it?
All right, I'm gonna get the other one here too. Better come. Oh,
I'm
he's
sorry, you
got
got-
a bird. This is the younger of the two, and he's an Icelandic sheepdog.
Oh my
And
God.
he's not as true to breed standard than his uncle is, who is the son of a champion. But they have birds to take away, as they are Icelandic sheepdogs, so they want to keep the any of the raptors away, like eagles and things, from taking sheep, and to keep the magpies away from sitting on top of the sheep and pecking eyes out. So that's what they naturally do. And one of their favorite treats is ice.
cute.
They're
And
beautiful.
one of the things I was going to say, I'm making the blanket this year. And I think it's really cool when you lay down I guess it's a rectangle, and you look at the different triangles in it. The ones that you're looking at face on look fuzzier than the ones on the other side. And if you turn it, it continues to do that. It's really neat.
Yeah, it's got an illusion to it, and that's twofold. The bloom of the fiber. I'm sorry, I have really bad allergies this week. The direction of the stitches is always going to be, toward the outer edges. So when you turn your square, you're sometimes looking at the bottom of some stitches and the top of other stitches, and the bloom is going to go only in one direction in the yarn. It doesn't really go both ways. And then the sheen of the fabric as well. It does have that sheen. And even though the marl kind of interrupts your perception of it, it will, on a large quantity of fabric, it will show itself again, if that makes sense.
There is another question in the chat. It says, why did you choose a hap shawl for this project?
I was gonna talk about haps next time instead, because we don't have I'm sorry, next Saturday. So we don't have a wool school. We have a wool school chat again on Wednesday. And then Saturday was like an off week for wool school. So I was gonna talk about haps that day. So let's wait till then. But I do love hap shawls. I've always really liked them. And it's a great way to use a variety of colors. So those are like the main reasons. But also we tend to gravitate to traditional wools in our little community of wool lovers. So a very traditional project appealed to me, you know, in that way.
So when you say wool school, that's the informational one like you did today.
Yes, when we talk about the sheep.
And those are the circled
No,
ones,
they're
or
in- the calendar doesn't reflect that. There's,
in
if
your-
you look at the first post in the forum, I couldn't get a new calendar, a graphic. But if you look at the first post in the forum, I've edited it to show, and there's a text list of which chats are wool school and which chats are just regular chats.
so
And
some
also,
of them are Wednesdays.
Yes.
every single email that goes out also has a schedule if you scroll down to it. Yeah, originally they were scheduled for, I think I had thrown out like, we'll do it on Saturdays, but then, you know, several people were like, are they gonna be staggered? You know, I can't always make it on Saturday, so I staggered the schedule because that seems to meet most people's needs, and they're recorded, so just like the barn box chats, they'll be posted on YouTube, I believe.
Now, the next
Anna?
chat, when you talk about half shawls, will it be posted on YouTube also?
I'm assuming, yes.
Okay.
Anna? Hello, I have the other one now with me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. So this is the guy that is from a Grand Champion. And one of the neat things about them, and you're
Hey,
not
you
going to be able to see.
Could you turn your cameras down a
I
little
have
so
to
we,
hold it there.
oh, look
Because
at
they're both here and they were having a lot of fun, but
oh, look
they
at
have
that.
extra thumbs. Oh, he's done performing. They have
Uh-huh.
extra thumbs.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So
Are
yeah,
they big?
on this,
Are they
they're about
big or
38 to 40 pounds.
oh, like a border collie? Kinda.
Yep. You know, they're a sheepdog.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you don't
Well,
want to perform.
some sheep dogs are big.
Some, yes. Mm-hmm.
They're just beautiful.
Yeah, they're really a wonderful breed, and you probably have heard the saying "man's best friend." And they're
Yeah.
the dog breed it was coined after.
Oh, they're so pretty. I bet you have a lot of cleanup to do during shedding season. You're muted.
They've been doing that a lot the last 2 weeks, so it's just a tremendous amount of fur. And they're wonderful dogs. And the UPS sometimes will stop by just to pet. Whereas opposed to the other dogs, which are shelter dogs, they wouldn't do that. But yeah, they are about as gentle as it gets.
Oh. There's so many cool dog breeds that like I don't think I've ever heard of Icelandic sheepdogs, but of course it makes total sense that there are some.
Apparently around in the 50s or 40s and 50s, there got to be so many of them in Iceland, they were just considered a pest, and they started to be put to sleep, and the flock or the herds, the dog breed numbers really collapsed. And then about 30 or 40 years ago, they realized that, you know, this is a valuable dog breed. And so in order to get the breeding quality back, they needed to go international for purebreds so that they could have more of a genetic base. And that's partly why you don't see many of them around, is there's just not a tremendous amount in the US. And they are such a gentle breed So we unfortunately have 2 people in the US that are trying to breed them to become aggressive. And that
Oh,
is terribly upsetting because it's supposed to be a docile breed.
Mhm.
And one of those dogs tried to attack the older one that you saw, but we were right next to the car and able to just pull him up by his leash and slam the car door shut. And the other person that was there teaching obedience was on her way over at a fast trot. And she's like, dang, if he'd bit, I would have killed the other one.
Wow.
Because we can't have that. And later on, the person did get bit by her dog very badly in the calf and have to go directly to the ER. And none of us felt sorry for her raising aggressive dogs because they are supposed to be kind and docile and herd people and herd sheep and be lovable.
What's the justification for
That's what I was.
raising
about to ask.
an aggressive sheepdog? Because is it to ward off predators or?
There is no justification. It's just some people decide that a pit bull needs to become mean and ugly, and others say, but it was a nice breed before you decide to do that nonsense.
Oh,
That
it was.
Excuse me, that
wasn't
happened
the-
with
it
German
wasn't-
Shepherd in the
It
US.
wasn't an Icelandic sheepdog that was being bred to be mean.
It was
Oh,
an
okay.
Icelandic sheepdog, and she's been kicked out of the breeding program because of that.
Oh.
And anybody that has breeding animals won't breed with her for this purpose because it's not acceptable and it's outside the norms of the trait.
Yeah.
If you look at some of these pictures that you see, little reels and stuff in Iceland of farmers walking along the road, they're just crowded by all these dogs around them, staring up at them and running next to them. That's the thing. And
Yeah.
the reason that I was read and told why they became so friendly and kind is that in the winter they would be brought into the house or brought into where the sheep were. And anyone that didn't get along, well, it couldn't cause all that trouble. And so then it got kicked out. So throughout 800 years of this type of get along or spend the night outside, and if you're still alive, maybe you'll change your attitude.
Yeah. Selective breeding for
It's
competitive.
selective breeding to not have murder in the house or in the barn.
Uh-huh. That's interesting.